Thank you for having grace. There's something in that passage that I want you to note. And I want you to note, first of all, I'm not going to preach as long as I'm used to preaching, but I'm going to give some time for thought and hopefully some discussion. So I want you to be thinking even in your mind of things that you can apply and share maybe with someone next to you. But before we go too far, there's a word in this passage that I don't think can be skipped over, because if you notice close, it says the workmanship will be evident because of the day will bring it to light. That word day is one of those, if you pass over it, you miss it. The word day is capitalized there. It should not be in any other context, except day is in itself a specific day that the author is talking about. He's talking about the day. The last day of creation, the first day of eternity, the day of judgment, the white throne judgment, the day of each one of us standing individually before God. And he's saying that in that day, all of our works, all of our life will be measured. Measured on a scale, measured based upon our works and our life and what we've done. And now some of you might hear this already and you're going, oh Lord, I'm scared. Rightfully so, in most cases. What does it look like to stand before a righteous and holy God and face that judgment day? And I know some people would say, I'm scared to death of that. I'm not sure what to really expect, but I know I'm not looking forward to that day. But the scripture says that that day is the day that our lives will be summed up, will be measured, will be weighed. It'll be a reality check. I think often we live our lives without thinking about that day, or even thinking about the last day of our own mortality. We don't often process, what is it going to look like when all of my life is placed on a scale? And yet Scripture says that it might be an important day to think about. In my ministry as a pastor, I've done more than a few funerals. And I might just say, by the way, I do enjoy doing funerals, probably even better than weddings. And there's multiple levels of reasons for that, but it's an opportunity to minister to families who are going through a difficult time, to offer hope and give them the opportunity to realize that there's more, to believe that God has a plan and that God is going to be with them even through that time. But there's this poem in the midst of sermons, funerals that I've done more than a few times. I've had people give me this poem and said, please read it. You may have heard this poem before, but I think it's appropriate for me to read here as we're thinking about the day that is to come, as we're thinking about a reality check of our own life, and in January thinking about a reality check of where God's taken us. I want us to think about this poem called The Dash. It was written by Linda Ellis in 1996. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that the first date came of birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represented all the time that they spent alive on earth. And now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we lived and loved and how we spent our dash. And I lost it as I scrolled. There we go. So think about this long and hard. There are things you'd like to change, for you never know how much time is left. That can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger, and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. if we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read, with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? Like I said, I've read this many times at funerals. I've heard people share it, but I don't think you've heard it in a regular sermon. I don't think you've heard things like this that challenge us to think about our own life a little bit differently, or what people would say about us when we're gone. When you look at life, you look around at your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, your family, you might look around and you only might see the differences. You might see the things that make people what they are. You might notice the political, the social, economical, health, language, nationalities, sexuality differences of people. You might notice those things and they might rip at you. We might like some things. We might hate other things. But you know what? Every one of us are all living in that dash. That same dash. What will last? What will not? What will make a difference? What will change a life, and what will not? The only foundation that will last, according to this passage that we just read, the only foundation that will stand at the end of time when we reach that day, the day of judgment, of reckoning, whatever you want to call it, the only foundation that will make a difference is Jesus Christ. The foundation which Paul says here that he built upon and others are building upon. He says that faith in Jesus Christ, living our life as Jesus taught, out of love and compassion, service, outreach, and mission, the kinds of things that we focus on as a church, living that way will make a difference. But then he goes on to say, by the way, living our life, building of wealth and empires and of church, even building family around us, those things are not necessarily things that will go with us. They're definitely not things that we will be measured upon. Because that day that we stand before God is only us. Everything worldly, everything mortal, everything of creation left behind. I think January is a great time for us to think about this reality check. What would somebody say about my dash if tomorrow I was not here? If I lived all of this year and I planned for this year and I visioned for this year and I live into it and I give my all, what would they say then about my dash? So here's your reality check. This month is different on purpose. The sermon's coming early. We're doing the Apostles' Creed. We're really focusing on what does it mean to be a person of faith. And these are the kinds of questions that I want us to talk about. What is the story of your dash? I want you to take just a moment and process it. What would someone say about you? If someone were to stand up and give your eulogy today, what would they say are the most important character qualities about you? What was most important to you? What did you value? What did you spend your time doing? If they were to measure the foundation that you built your life on, would they say that it was built upon faith and upon Christ? How much priority do you give your faith? I had heard one pastor share, and I should have wrote this all down, but I had one pastor share about the importance of being involved in church and committing to not only participation and attendance, but service and activity. And he said, a good way to measure it is, if God were to measure your faithfulness the same way that, let's just say, you measured the faithfulness of your car. I mean, what if your car decided not to start, just once a week? What if your refrigerator only worked, 4 days a week? What if you only showed up at work? If you decided to skip work just once or twice a month? What if you skipped your morning devotional, your prayer time, or your commitment to service? How is it that school and sports and other things can be prioritized, and yet faith always gets the back seat? What would someone say about the impact that you had on others? And what have you done that will outlast that day? I really wanted to challenge you guys to, in this space, talk about it. I'm not sure that we're up for that tonight, because I'm sure that if I asked you to turn to each other and say, share some of these personal things, you might not. But my fear is to let you go home after worship and try and process all of this on your own, or write down on a card things that you want to change for the new year in your reality check. You just won't do it. Ultimately, I guess that's between you and God. The sermon's at the beginning of worship today, just first of all, to make you think. Second of all, that as we enter into this time of worship, we call music a time of worship. It's a time where we lift our hearts to God. It's a time where we lay ourselves out in front of God. And just because you are in that time doesn't mean you have to sing. But I've seen people weep, or seen people bow, seen people raise their hands. It's a time where you can actually allow yourself to be in the presence of God. And hopefully, I'm inviting you today to allow a conversation between yourself and God about your dash, about your reality check, about what you want to be different this year. And ask God for the courage to step out and do it. I do invite you, after church, we always have a Saturday night talk back, and everybody's invited. Stick around. These are the questions we'll be talking about tonight. And I hope that you'll be courageous, willing even to be vulnerable with what some of those challenges are, or what changes you want to make. Would you pray with me?